Class 24 on the Golden Doves, Introduction, page Roman numeral 20. Reading the first chapter examines the constituents of the book. Sorry about that. And its relation to the people. So that's very interesting. So a book doesn't just exist in the abstract, right? There's a relationship between a book or a sefer in Hebrew, any book, and the people for whom the book was written. The author surrenders his work to a public, moser, mesira. That's a legal, technical term. So somebody is moser shetarotav lebet din. He deposits his contracts with the court. That's a technical term. So in this case, you have the author, and the author of the book is moser his book to the reading public. Now, when you're an author and you're moser, you entrust your book to the reading public, it's an act of trust because you're entrusting the people with the hermeneutical and cultural codes needed to process the text. So if you write a book, you have something in mind. You want to express to convey a particular message. And the book has a system of values through which the book is to be decoded and understood, right? In this fashion, a covenantal relationship between author and public is established. So without the covenant, the public can abuse the book, right? So you need to have a covenantal relationship between the author of the book and the public to whom the book is entrusted. So that's the idea of Hashem being moser, the Torah, to Bnei Israel, to Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu mesara Yoshua, Yoshua l'Zkenim. So the idea of mesira, it requires the idea of berit. Because if you don't have a berit, then the Jewish people, they receive the book and they can abuse the book. They can choose to read the book as a book, chas v'shalom, that supports Avodah Zarah and pagan beliefs and Darkei HaEmori. So we see today in Judaism how there's many sects that called Hasidic sects. There's no Hasidut. Just wearing a odd uniform doesn't make you a Hasid, at least not as the Torah defines a Hasid. But nevertheless, you see many of these sects, they have ideas that come from the old Avodah Zarah of Eastern Europe. This obsession with the dead, this obsession with going to Batei Kevarot. I go to Tzfat sometimes, you see in Tzfat, they have all these rituals that they do by the Batei Kevarot, by the dead people, right? So here we see how the Torah can be abused, right? Any book can be abused, even the Torah can be abused. You can read it as a formula for Avodah Zarah. So the only way to avoid that is to have a covenant, a berit. And under the berit, Hashem says, I'm giving you the Torah shebe'al peh. I want you to decode the Torah shebichtav in accordance with the Torah shebe'al peh. And based upon this, I'm entrusting the book to you. Right? So that's an act of trust. Outside such a relationship, meaning author, covenant, reading public, delineating the semiotic and semantic possibilities of the text, writing is graffiti, not a book, because you can take any text and abuse it. So if you don't have limits, here's the way to decode the book. We have Yud Gimal Midot She'atorah Nidreshet Bahem, for example. There could be more midot, but it's not an infinite number of midot. It's a very specific number of midot, right? So if you don't have that, that means that anything goes. And if anything goes, then the book becomes a non-book. It becomes graffiti. What do I mean by graffiti? So graffiti are things that have an evocative aspect to them. They evoke feelings. right? You can't penetrate the particular message intelligently, right? Because it's all about emotions. So a great example of that is Black Lives Matter, right? That is very evocative a sentence. You can't analyze it and say, wait, do white lives matter? In fact, those types of questions are not just annoying, but are heretical and extremely offensive because that's the nature of graffiti. Graffiti doesn't allow itself to be analyzed at the linguistic textual level, right? So when you have a book and you don't have particular limits to how to read the book, all the book becomes is graffiti, right? Because you can read anything any way you want to read it. Look at the US Constitution. By the way, I'm not for abortion, I'm not anti-abortion. Please do not read my political ideas into these classes. That would be unjustified and quite frankly, inappropriate. Nevertheless, the US Constitution doesn't say a word about abortion. And there is nothing in the US Constitution that would somehow limit the state's rights to put limitations on abortion. I'm not interested in what your political views are on abortion. I'm just stating an empirical fact, you know. Facts don't care about our feelings. So, you know, it's just the facts and we shouldn't be afraid of facts, right? So the point is, but if you don't have a berit, then yeah, you'll take the Constitution and you will turn it into a socialist, Marxist document, right? The Constitution came precisely to go against the Eastern European dictators and monarchs who were able to do whatever they wanted to, unlimited government. This attempt today to turn the Constitution, again, I don't care what your political views are. I'm not expressing my political views. Maybe I'm a Marxist. Maybe I'm a communist. I don't know. Because it's my point here is not to teach on political ideology. Maybe I'm not a Marxist. Maybe I'm not a communist. I don't know. But the point is, this attempt to turn the Constitution into a document that somehow allows for Marxist ideology in the United States is outrageous. But it's possible because you have your text, but you don't have the berit. Now, we know how the text is supposed to be read. The founding fathers taught us how to read it, and they left behind their writings on how to read the text and what the proper reading of the Constitution is. It's not a secret. Not a single Supreme Court justice who doesn't understand what the Constitution actually says and how it's actually supposed to be read. It's all right there. We have it. We have the Federalist Papers. We have all of the various discussions that took place in the convention. We understand and we know, but we don't care because we are actually looking at the Constitution as an impediment to what we want, right? That's all the Constitution has become. So you see how when you don't have a covenant, words in the Constitution, they just become graffiti. They don't have any actual text. It's all about, you know, evoking particular emotions, you know, freedom of speech, whatever that means. What does that mean, freedom of speech? Am I free to express my political views if they disagree with yours? Am I free not to be attacked by the media mob if I say something that the media mob doesn't quite agree with? So the point is that it's all graffiti. It has no substance to it. It has no textual substance to it. These are just, you know, symbolic slabs that people throw out, and each one of these slabs attaches to it intense emotions, right? Hands up, don't shoot. I mean, again, you know, that's just a very evocative statement. Hands up, don't shoot. It doesn't matter whether that did or didn't happen. You understand? That doesn't matter. It's the slab, it's the graffiti, and that graffiti attaches with it tremendous emotion, right? Right. For the Hebrews, the book is their national symbol. It is the book. Now here we see, in contrast to Ummot HaOlam, Am Yisrael considers the book to be its national symbol. Thus, meaning we have a covenant to protect the book, and that covenant so deeply ingrains in us the idea of protecting the book that we actually turn the book into our national symbol. Thus, the Hebrews themselves became the symbol of the book, right? That's why when they used to burn the Jews in the various persecutions, they used to inevitably burn them with the Sefer Torah, because the Jew symbolized the Torah, and the Torah symbolized the Jew. This total absolute identification creates the book, and that's what a book really is. You can have a lot of literary works. You can have a lot of things written on pieces of paper. But for a book, quote unquote, to be a book, right, there must be a people to whom the book is written for, to whom the book is entrusted to. The people are limited in how they can read the book to a particular hermeneutical code, and the people bind themselves to the book through a covenant. That's what a book is. And in that regard, the only true book is the Jewish Torah, because the Jewish Torah is the only book that meets that definition. Book, people, results in a reciprocal relationship. The people affect the book, and the book affects the people, right? We affect the book by reading it, by interpreting it, by giving it new meanings. And of course, the book affects us because we are bound by the book, and we become a holy nation because of our adherence to the book. Thus, the book is not merely a book, a literary instance. Rather, it is a literary genre, a mode conditioning the reader's attitude towards the text, right? So again, you can have a lot of writings. You can have a comic in the New York Post or in the New York Times. That's a literary instance, right? So some literature. But in the case of the book, it wasn't just that we received a piece of paper with words on it, but no, rather we received, together with this written text, this literary instance, we received the Torah Shebe'al Peh, le mental, and that le mental conditions the way we read the book, the written text, and that's what makes it a book. Borges noted in another context, literary genres depend perhaps less on the text than on the mode in which they are read. That's very interesting. There's nothing inside any particular story that says, I am a horror story, or I am a mystery story, right? So it depends less on the actual internal four corners of the document, but there is a mode in which they are read, and you're supposed to know the mode. There's a particular makam, and you're supposed to follow the makam, right? The aesthetic fact necessitates a conjunction of the reader and the text, and for there to be an artistic fact, a feeling. So the reader reads a text, he confronts the text, he feels something from the text, right? But for that to happen, the reader has to meet the text and the text has to meet the reader. And only then does it exist, right? So if you have a text with no reader, it's kind of like having the proverbial tree falling in the forest with no one there to hear it, right? It's irrelevant whether it made sound or not, notwithstanding the philosophical discussions. It's just an irrelevancy. Who cares, right? So here you have a book, but you don't have a reading public, right? So the US Constitution used to have a reading public until the Supreme Court did what it did to it, right? So it no longer, it's at the moment that the Supreme Court ceased to treat it in a covenantal manner, then it ceased to be a book, because there is nobody reading the Constitution anymore. In contrast, when Am Yisrael reads the Torah, we create the book, and the book creates us. Right? I'm reading Borges here, of course, but it's what Borges is saying about literature is equally true about the Torah. So it begins to exist when a reader opens it. That's when the book begins to exist, right? Then the aesthetic phenomenon exists. It is similar to the moment in which the book was conceived. Amazing. So when the writer writes, when the author writes the book, he conceives of the book. That's an aesthetic moment. Because now there's an interaction between the mind of the author and the text, or the text rather is an expression of those thoughts. Similarly, when the reader reads the book, he's creating the book in his mind, right? So that's where the book comes into existence. The special book people relate, that's under the quote of Borges. The special book people relationship is manifest in the rabbinic institution for the public reading, Keri'ah b'sibur of the Torah. This that Am Yisrael, till today, thousands of years later, has a public reading of the Torah, highlighting the fact that this is the national text of the Jewish people, highlighting the fact that this is what makes us who we are, right? On the one hand, public reading is concerned with the accepted sense of the text. Right. So first of all, the Keri'ah b'sibur, of course, is the peshat of the text, right? He just reads the text, and everybody listens to the text. At this level, the reader must comply with the conventions of the audience. Errors or deviations are not tolerated, right? You have to know how to read properly, of course. So, but that's peshat, right? On the other hand, public reading must be accompanied by the Targum, or Aramaic version, the version in the colloquial language of the Jews in rabbinic times. So now, together with the reading of the actual text of the Torah Shebichtav, they used to and properly would read the Targum, right? And the Targum was in the spoken language of those times. In those times, people didn't speak Hebrew, they spoke Aramaic. The Targumim, particularly those that were recited in the Holy Land, are not plain translations of the text. Rather, they are punctuated by numerous passages and terms reflecting the lore, exegesis, and legal views current at the time. Very interesting. So the various Targumim of the Chumash were not just translations of the words, right? But rather, they elaborated. They contained a lot of midrashim. They contained certain agadot. They also contained certain halachot. So, because of this, therefore, in the Holy Land, it took 3 years to finish reading the Torah instead of the 1 year customary in the diaspora. Because again, the Targum wasn't just a literal translation of the text, but it was an explanation of the text. So the recitation of the Targum, an institution preserved in the Yemenite synagogue to the present day, functions as a reader response on the part of the audience. The Meturgeman translator stands by the reader and recites the Aramaic version after every verse read from the Hebrew text. Interesting. So it's almost like the public is reacting to the text. We're not just passively listening to the text. Of course, there is a Koreh Torah. The Koreh Torah is reading, and we listen. But then we have the Meturgeman. The Meturgeman is a translator. He represents a Sibur. And it's as if the Meturgeman is reacting to the Koreh, right? Because he is transforming the text into a form that is understandable by the Sibur. So it's almost like the Sibur now is kind of repeating the text at a level that they understand. Here again, errors are not tolerated. Departures and deviations from the conventional, however, Oh, right, okay. Right, you have to read the Targum properly, right? Right. So the Meturgeman is thus expressing the feeling and understanding of the public. As we said, the Targum would be not based on the scientific lexical meaning of words. No, it was based on how people understood these Pesukim. And again, oftentimes there are certain Midrashim that people were familiar with on certain Pesukim, and that would be included in the Targum. Here again, errors are not tolerated, we said. Departures and deviations from the conventional, however, are allowed in private reading. That's interesting. So you have the public reading, Kari'ah al-Sibur, and you have the private reading of the Hacham is reading a Pasuk. The expression al tikre, do not read it, that is in the customary form, introduces a deliberate departure from the established reading. Al tikre, ela, right? What is al tikre? Right? So he says that this is allowed only in private reading, not in public reading, alluding to this to sort of a private derasha, alluding to this level of reading. Rabbi Yoshua asked his younger colleague, Rabbi Ishmael, how do you read a passage in the Song of Songs? So continuing, all right, the derasha pertains to reading, but it is not reading. Reading the derasha in the text will come later, when the master of the derasha has created a public who had assimilated the derasha and now reads it in the text at hand, right? So that's like the way the Targum worked. Like many of the translations of the Targum, as noted, are not actual translations, but they contain derashot in them. So those derashot were originally expounded by whatever Hachamim expounded them, and eventually they became part of the mental vocabulary of the readers. So when they saw that pasuk, they would associate it with a particular derasha, and then the Targum, reflecting the audience reaction to the written text, would use those derashot, right? Right. So we said that already. I'm skipping now. So derasha is grounded on the special book-people relationship. It is not simply the effect of a sacred text written in the divine language. It will be seen that the derasha is methodologically akin to some of the hermeneutical rules applied in antiquity to the interpretation of dreams in literary texts. So whenever you have a literary text and you interpret the literary text, you're making a derasha on the text. It doesn't mean that the text is holy, right? So this that we do derashot on the Torah is holy, right? But that's not why we do derashot, meaning derashot is not the earmark of a holy versus a secular text. That's the point. Moreover, the rabbis taught that the Torah expresses itself in the language of man. So we have the idea of the Bera Torah, Kulshon Bnei Adam. Since derasha must express the cultural and hermeneutical codes of the author and the people, doresh behaggadot shel dofi, expounding, faltering interpretations violating the hermeneutical code, or an alien derasha violating the cultural code, constitutes a betrayal of the covenantal author-people relationship and renders the derasha illegal. So again, as I said, not every derasha is a legitimate derasha. A derasha has to be within the purview of the particular hermeneutical code set forth by the author. In this case, the author is Hashem, and the hermeneutical code is the Torah Shebe'al Peh. So you can make derashot within the purview and within the limitations allowed by the Torah Shebe'al Peh. The book and Dirasha include creation. Okay, this is a new subject, the idea of creation. We will deal with this in the next class.